All you can eat data you can FaceTime forever with the ones you love. Plus, get the amazing Samsung S20 for free when you switch or upgrade today. 3. Make it count. Selected plans only. Standard monthly charge applies from 2021. Up to 24-month contract applies. All you can eat data. ROI only. See 3.ie.
You invented what, sir?
The pop-up tent. Perfect for camping, parties, even business market stalls with folding tables.
Sir, Omar Camping's been supplying pop-up tents for ages.
Oh, yeah? Well, does Omar Camping do accessories? Folding tables and chairs, gas cookers, fridges and griddles?
Yes, and airbags and toilets and cool boxes.
Well, what about this then?
Sir, you did not invent the sleeping bag.
That's what Omar Camping wants you to think. It's a conspiracy.
No, it's Omar Camping.
Tents for events and a whole lot more. That'll be omaracamping.com.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Phillips, the short ball, and they roll over, and it's a tie. What an opening for the British and Irish Lions. Alex Corbisiero, incredible start.
Yeah, that is our next guest, Alex Corbisiero, scoring for the Lions in 2013, the Sydney decider. We all remember it for Brian O'Driscoll being dropped, but the Lions did actually win that day, and Warren Gatland gave Alex Corbisiero his personal man of the match. Alex, you're very welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, and great to see that little clip there. Get me smiling as we start.
Look at you. You've got the guns out. I should let people know at home. They are out. They are proud. They're screaming down the camera to me here.
They're there. It's hot here. That's the only reason. I apologize for the vest, but it's pretty hot here down in California today, and so I didn't want to be sweating on camera.
That is okay. California, you are right in the midst of COVID-19 crisis, really. Last time I looked last night, I was watching the TV. It's been shut down again, I think, the state.
Yeah, everything's kind of rolling out, sort of re-rolling back, I should say, a lot of the openings that had happened due to the surging in cases. Hard to say exactly where it's coming from as such. It seems to be large gatherings like 4th of July, people outside in big groups. Trying to keep it pretty low key. Me and my fiance, and we have one other housemate. Try not to interact too much and just do the best we can here. But it's not good signs when you sort of turn on the news and you see the cases going up and businesses having to close again that maybe only just opened. That you feel kind of heartbroken for some of those people as well, whose livelihoods are in question. Yes,
you have a mad president doing mad things, and then states doing their own things, and it's just a weird concoction.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think the reason is how fragmented the United States is from a governance point of view, that it almost completely puts this sort of COVID response predominantly in either governor to county to mayor to town level. Everyone's got their own rules, and so there's no uniformity across one of the biggest countries in the world, and there's still freedom of movement within that country. So really, it seems almost an impossible task under the current system it has to actually get to a point where you'll have no cases going on right now.
Yeah. Our guest, if you're just tuning in, is Alex Corbisiero here on Off the Ball. So I'll give the basic details. 31 years of age, American-born, grew up in England, found rugby, a loose head prop, London Irish, Northampton, and then England as well. 31 caps across 5 years, 2011 to 2016. The Lions Tour of Australia, obviously, in 2013. And then about 2016 or so, you took what was going to be a year out of the game, mentally, physically exhausted, only 27 years of age, and started doing some media work in the US with NBC. And you seem to have drifted from there into retirement. That's, in broad strokes, the story. And I should mention as well, it's thankfully not something I say too often to guests, but in the last year, you were diagnosed with cancer.
Yes, it's been you hit the nail on the head on my story. I think you hit all the bullet points. Well, where do I start? Leaving rugby was never easy, but after all the injuries I'd had and maybe the love of the game at the time had kind of worn off a little bit. And then with the role opening at NBC, it gave me an opportunity to almost transition to life after rugby. And then I made a calculated decision that I think that was the right time for me. And going back, I don't feel like I would have achieved more than I had already. I might have got a few more years of professional rugby out and everything. But for the whole, that kind of gauge that decision. Now I've been in the US, going back and forth between the US and the UK. The dual citizenship is fantastic. The work at NBC is amazing. Have a podcast, have a few other ventures that I have going on, and it allows me the flexibility to live out here. And then this year's been quite challenging just because of testicular cancer diagnosis in November, which resulted in surgery. Luckily, only one round of chemotherapy, which was more a precautionary measure. And as of now, I'm cancer-free and monitoring and hoping it doesn't come back. It's around about the 2-year mark that most people sort of, if it does come, it's usually around then. So that'll be the next sort of hurdle, is to get through that. And then hopefully then it's all behind me.
On the day you were diagnosed back in November, were you a man expecting that diagnosis?
No. In hindsight, I probably was a little bit in denial. I had one testicle that was considerably larger than the other one and harder. No lump or anything, but definitely a change where if I'd known what I know now and gone in and known, I probably would have already had my fate set up. But I just felt like it was the right thing to do because it had been a bit sore. It felt a bit large. I was like, oh, let me go get it checked. I had jiu-jitsu with my brother booked afterwards. He was in the car outside waiting. Didn't really plan on it being that. I just felt better getting it ticked off, that it, finding out that it wasn't something bad and everything was fine. Immediately, the doctor felt it. Before he'd even scanned or anything, he said, what do you think it is? And I said, I'm worried it could be testicular cancer. And he said to me, I'm telling you now, you've got it. He's like, we'll do all the tests and everything, but just by feeling it, I know you have it. So it kind of sank in immediately. And then you're just kind of...
At that point, the room starts to swim, I would think.
Yeah. And I think the hardest part is that there was so much I didn't know about it. Like all I wanted to do is make sure that I survived it, because I was like, I don't know what my chances are. All I know is the word cancer and the connotations that come with that and what I've seen. But luckily, the type I had, the fact it hadn't spread yet, so I caught it without leaving sort of the testicles to get to my lymph nodes, put me in a very good category. One, for survival, but two, for the treatment opportunities I had weren't as dire as they can be on the chemotherapy route.
How long, Alex, between that initial meeting with the doctor and him telling you, I don't even need to scan this, I know where you are, you have this? How long from that day until you found out it hadn't spread?
So about 24 hours, you find out on the CT that it hadn't spread. And so once I got those results, I was pretty calm, because that was the most nervy, is when you're waiting, because they're saying it could go anywhere from your testicle, it could be all the way in your lungs to your brain. They did tell me that the survival rate is so high that regardless of where it spreads, you should be okay. You'll need a lot of chemo as such, because it responds incredibly well to chemotherapy, testicular cancer, all the different types. But really, what was harder was when we got back to England, they looked at my CT scan that I had there, and they had a few questions about one of my lymph nodes, which got sent to another specialist. So there was a little bit of a nervy couple days, again, waiting for that to be 100% signed off. And then I got it signed off again, and then I was completely at ease, just knowing the certainty of the course of action. I think the hardest part in those situations is the unknowns, and controlling and finding ways to let your mind be at peace with controlling things you can't control. And, worrying about diagnosis was probably the hardest of that. Once you actually know what you have, there's a bit of the anticipation of the treatments, but it seemed much more like rugby then, is, okay, I've done this to my knee, or I've done this, I need this surgery, this rehab, and I'll be back. It kind of felt more into that pathway once all of that happened.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. Still, that is a long 24 hours. You were having thoughts as a 31-year-old you had not been having before.
No, and it's life-changing, and it really is the first time. I think the biggest shock is not like, oh my God, panic, I don't want to die. It's just the first time I ever really felt, that vulnerability in my life. In my whole life, I've not had any health complications other than the surgeries from rugby, which none of them were ever in a position of life-threatening or changing. So it's the first time in a young, and so I'm clawing on to a young man's life at 31, but I'm going to keep that title for now. First time that you ever faced that sort of encounter of potential death, or worrying about things that you can't fight through, or your strength can't get you through, was sort of really the mental challenge of this whole sort of thing going on.
I saw you went home to London for treatment. Why was that?
One, I wanted my family were there and able sort of to look after me and nurse me. I thought about staying here in the US, but my fiance is full-time professional athlete. She was about to leave for the Sevens tours to Dubai and Cape Town, having surgery and recovering on my own over here just didn't seem the right move. And then two, the American healthcare system isn't, well, with the insurance that I had over here, it wasn't being quite expensive to have the full treatment that I needed. Where in the UK, I had my surgeries done privately, a much more affordable rate, and then luckily I had the NHS to take care of my chemo. And thankful to everyone there, really, for sort of saving my life.
Yeah. I read a piece you did in the London Times, and even in that piece you were absolutely insistent that you didn't want this to sound like you've had the worst experience here, and you know that people have far more difficult experiences. So I asked the question in that context. But you said as well in that interview, I let myself down at times and let it get the better of me, which to me seemed quite hard on yourself. I think you're allowed to let cancer get the best of you. What did you mean by I let it get the better of me?
Just mentally, I think at times, like you said, I felt very lucky, and I felt kind of bad, almost the label of cancer was what I had, based on how my care and treatment was pretty straightforward. And you compare it to some of the people I saw on the chemo ward, or other people I know who've fought through cancer. I didn't really feel like mine was on the same level as theirs. But I think the mental side, the being at home, the feeling sick from the chemo, being separated from my my partner because of work, even though she did come visit at times, I just felt mentally like I let my mind win at times. I think, you know, I have the tendency sometimes to overthink situations, and sometimes I let my mind sort of defeat me on that instead of sort of focusing on the present and being aware. I let it get caught up in hypotheticals and thoughts and stress myself out more than I needed to, because obviously it's not ignoring that this was a tough situation to be in, but I just felt being honesty and holding myself accountable, I could have handled things better. That, you know, if I had a time machine, I would have said, why did you let that affect you when really nothing changed because of it, or you were worried about this and whatever. And I think that's really where those comments were coming from.
Okay. So as you said, you're still, you know, in the midst of monitoring, and that's kind of a strange place to be. Again, this is also recent. You're probably in the midst of it, and even just the diagnosis and the surgery and the chemo, there's a shock and a trauma probably with all of that, and maybe 6-7 months on, I don't know, does that suddenly hit you, or are you more emotional or more vulnerable feeling?
I felt like in some ways, I know this COVID quarantine period for a lot of people have been a really tough time. And I think in a weird way, the beginning of it came at a perfect time for me, because I had kind of just gone through everything and then jumped straight back on the wagon of working, traveling. I was out of shape. I wasn't myself, but I was just kind of back in the normal routine, just getting on with it. And it wasn't until sort of the lockdown happened and I had some time, no travel, resting, eating healthy, training, you know, lots of meditation, working on myself, I kind of was able to reflect and put back in perspective how out of whack I might have been from the whole thing, where I think I had maybe a little bit of denial or a little bit of just tunnel vision looking forward. You don't actually take in full account, you know, how setback or how off kilter you might be. And this time it's really given me a good chance to reset. I feel physically great again. I feel back in shape. I feel healthy. I'm eating well. Everything's going well, and I just feel ready to sort of, like, when work does eventually start back up for NBC and rugby, I feel like refreshed and ready to crack back on and feel like I'm going to kick it on another level and in anything I do, because I've had this chance to sort of, you know, reset and get my equilibrium back, as best I would describe it.
Good man. Whew, that is a weird 9-10 months, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I got engaged literally after a month and a bit of being engaged. You're getting diagnosed with cancer. It's been a crazy year, but it is what it is, and we're still trucking forward. And you know, I just want to, any experience that happens in life, you just try and learn from it to be better from it. And I feel like that's the goal with this as well.
Yes, I'm sure. And at a time in your life which should be so joyous, and I don't want to pry here, but I'm sure things like, I want to have a family in the future, all of that stuff is suddenly up for grabs.
Completely. Well, they obviously have to remove a testicle. And so, you know, there's a chance that, you know, you might have had producing sperm before, but there's always a risk that one of your testicles was the one that was producing it and the other one was a dud. So when they opt to take the first one out immediately, when you go to find out if you're still have a sperm count or whatever, that's a nervous thing. Luckily, I still do. Great. But then you have to have it, because you have the chemo, there's always a chance the chemo can make you impotent. So then you freeze freeze some of your sperm. So hopefully you can have a family one day. Hopefully in a year they'll retest and it will show that it didn't make me infertile. But the goal is that, you know, if it is, at least we're prepared for it.
Did you go to counselling or talk to anyone during all this, Alex?
Yeah, I've had on and off a therapist I see, and I also have like kind of a good group of 2 or 3 core friends who are very devoted to sort of, you know, talking out the mental health side of them and their development and curve and improving, and I feel confident with them sharing what I've been through as well, and almost like a group therapy in that. And then I actually have a therapist that I work on with myself as well. I found that after rugby, I found that a little bit when I was injured, but I didn't quite find the benefit until I left rugby of how valuable having someone to talk to and that care and counselling is.
Yes, I'm sure. So you mentioned, we touched on your career there. London Irish, Northampton, 31 caps for England across 5 years, 11 to 16, on that Lions tour, scoring a try in the Sydney decider. And at the end, at 2016 territory, you decide to take what's meant to be a break, and that has segued into retirement, I suppose. Did you have a feeling when you walked away from the game that it would be retirement? Give us a sense of the reasons. I mean, burnout, exhaustion, these are kind of vague terms.
There was part of me that wasn't sure if I was coming back or not. I think, and there was other part of me, if you caught me on a different day, said I'm 100% coming back. I think the thing I needed at the time the most was I was just desperate for breathing room. I'd been in this professional rugby environment since I left school at 17. Other than a couple of weeks off each year, it's a 24/7 lifestyle, and I'm an obsessive personality. I live and breathe it in everything I do, and I think that you know, with the injuries and the constant fight back, get what you are, get back playing, try and get back to the form that you've already showed. And then eventually, really, you're just managing injuries enough to play. And I wasn't improving, constant pain, performances aren't where you used to be. All of those things was really leaving a sour taste in my mouth for the game. And it was almost turning into like, it felt like I was getting claustrophobic being in that environment. And at the time, I just wanted a break. I just wanted to not have to turn up to training, not have to text a physio, not have to look at my knee for a day, checking if it was swollen or not worrying about have I iced, how much I've been on my feet. All these things I just needed a break from. And when I found that break and I had a bit of freedom to try different avenues out, I was starting to think, you know, this might be the best thing for me. And my biggest issue was it too soon? And I hadn't quite found the bridge to life after rugby, yes or no. And when I found the NBC role, I found a vocation that financially helped support me, gave me flexibility to do other opportunities, to come back to the United States and spend a lot more time with my family over here. All of those things sort of circled around and helped me make my mind up. Because I did have that summer that I stopped in December. By June, I had a contract offer at Harlequins that I was really debating. And it was between going back and playing for Harlequins, being closer to home, working with Graham Roundtree. Joe Marlowe was there as well. So it would have been a much more rotated schedule for me. I wouldn't have to, you know, be sort of the big signing that's expected to play every week. It seemed like an avenue back if I wanted it. But I just realized that the thing I love about rugby is every time I played it, every time I did it, I was aiming to be the best I could be. I was aiming to be the best in the world. I feel at times I set a marker down that would be close to showing that. And there's other times that my body wasn't able to keep me on the field and it was tough to deal with. But I'm very happy with what I achieved. I'm happy with what I had. And I think I left rugby for the right reasons. And I think while I was playing it for the right reasons. It never sort of turned into chasing a paycheck. And I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to taint my love of the sport anymore. And as I've had time apart from it, I think a lot of those wounds that were bothering me at the time have healed. And I have nothing but sort of a love affair with the sport again in the different way that I'm connected with it. So I'm very happy.
Yes, okay. Because I read a couple of interviews you gave not so long after you'd left the game. And I really got a sense of someone who had found the relentless nature of the Premiership a lot to deal with, the relentless demands from the environment, be it psychological or physical, a lot to deal with. And you know, you sounded like somebody burnt out. You didn't paint the environment as especially hospitable or gentle. I mean, pretty cutthroat, I have to say.
It's relentless. And I think, you know, in the Premiership, I don't think there's a harder grind being that player that goes between club and country. because I think especially if you're a bigger signing at your Premiership team, they want you on the field every game. That league is so competitive now. You can lose to anyone. 2 losses can be the difference now between in the playoffs or 7th or 8th and out of Europe. So really every game there counts. The physical demands, there's no easy games. Training's hard. And then as soon as you're out of that environment, you get to England, you're already beaten up, you're already torn. And you're expected to take your training environment to a new intensity, then play at a new intensity, and literally do 4 or 5 weeks, sometimes 6 to 8 if it's the Six Nations of that, and then get spat back out to your club who's in dire need of you and they expect you to be on the field. When I was fully healthy and didn't have injuries all the time, that was achievable. It was still tough. But once I had wear and tear on the body, once mentally I was probably a little more fragile than I probably would admit at the time until the end, but I admit it now. All of that became harder and harder, put more pressure on yourself, don't want to let people down. The type of player I was, you can ask anyone of the Irish lads and the Lions or anyone I've played with, I don't think anyone can ever question my commitment and my buy-in to the team and my willingness to put my body on the line for my teammates. It was more, I got too far down that road that the cost was so much pain, so much discomfort and long-term damage to my knees that, there was only so much runway I had left with that sort of mentality.
So you can speak out now. You're free. You're not part of any club. But it sounds like the general expectation would have been, look, Alex, wrap up the knee, take the painkillers, get on the pitch and do it again next week. As opposed to, do you need a break? Are you okay?
Exactly. The thing is, they would say is get on the pitch and you won't have to train again until Thursday and we'll do it again. But when you're niggling or managing something, for a couple of weeks, that's manageable. But when that becomes your whole season, you're not in the same shape. You're in pain. Your performances decline. You can't practice. I think the biggest thing that frustrated me is I loved getting better. I loved training. I loved learning new skills. I loved improving. I feel like that was one of the areas where I was able to get to the top level so young, is that I learned quickly. I learned what I needed to do, especially around the set piece time. That made me a bit able to play international rugby. And then the rest of the other attributes I brought sort of were able to flourish. But it was really the ability to learn what sometimes took people by 25, 26 to learn and be physically able to do. I was able to do it 21, 22, a bit like Cian Healy and a few guys that sort of changed the mold of the younger sort of generation of props that broke in early in their 20s, if not later in their 20s. And those are things I enjoyed, but when those things weren't able to carry on anymore and I couldn't keep improving, just didn't want to do it in the same way. It didn't get the passion that I had for this game since I played since I was age 5. I love it. I'm obsessed about it. All the little details, all the everything. And when you can't actually do what you love in a sport that you've done that for so long, it just became hard for me to accept, really. And it was a reminder glaring in my face of sort of the new reality, which I didn't really enjoy.
No, I can understand that. So the rugby global calendar is about to change, and you as an England player will have 5 Six Nations games. You'll have maybe 3 tests in June. You might go on a British and Irish Lions tour, and then you've got the Premiership on top of all that, and training in the midst of it. What is a fair workload for a player? Like, how many games can your average player handle? I know positions vary, of course, and minutes on the pitch vary. But I mean, what should we be asking of a modern day player in 2021 going forward in terms of games per year?
It's really tough, and I think it's very tough to quantify an actual number, positional, age. You almost end up like to get it exact for each player, you have to know the total meters, what they trained, all these different things. So I think that's unachievable. But having some set of fair limit, it used to be 32 games. I believe it's 30 now, but it's 30 full 80. So if you're a prop, that I think Dan Cole and a few people hit 40, 42 games and didn't actually get the full 80 minutes of their thing, of their 32 game limit or stuff. So they were still under the limit. So I think addressing areas like that, the maximum amount, it isn't really an answerable question as, if we all played 30 games, it would be better. I think it's more the structure of the season is still going to mean a lot of games. The financial implications of COVID and the desperation for match revenue is going to mean more games. And I guess right now in these uncertain times for players, the choice is hold out and try and get these limits and play no rugby, or come back and do whatever you can and play rugby and make money for your family and be a part of the sport. And right now, I don't think there's an answer or an avenue, especially after COVID, that's going to lead to sort of a modified playing schedule that's going to favor players. I haven't heard any updates on the global calendar. I saw the Lions announce that they're still going to stick to their timeline, which makes me wonder how the global calendar is actually going to work. And so I don't even know if we're going to actually see a change then, because one of the things that's mind-blowing about rugby, you've got this global pandemic, the sport in general is in question, revenue streams for club countries are all up in jeopardy. You'd think this would be the time that would get people to work together and get on the same page, but it seems like that's still unachievable at the top levels of the sport to put together a new season that might allow sort of a look at player welfare, because you actually have one season that you can layer everyone's games over, and two, a financial model that would support, either more revenue for clubs, the ability, like if players are going to play less games, they have to be prepared to take less money. And right now, because of COVID, a lot of players are taking less money, but they're probably going to end up playing, now they've had a break, but they're probably going to end up playing more games in a shorter period of time because of what's happened. So it all kind of needs to be sort of turned up on its head and aligned from the top down, and then players have a proper negotiating seat at the table. That actually might lead to an ability where there's a template of a season that fits a safer workload for players. But as it is right now, I just don't foresee that.
Okay. We're talking here with Alex Corbisiero. Our rugby coverage brought to you with thanks to Vodafone, Team of Us, everyone in. So you're over working with NBC in the States. Pretty cool gig to get. A nice way to reinvent yourself post-playing career. That is a competitive marketplace. I'm sure there are great hopes to try and capture the imagination over there. Does it feel like it's heading in the right direction, or still, very difficult inch at a time?
It's moving in the right direction, but it is an inch at a time.
Yeah.
And each inch is valuable, and it's a big step forward, and there's more little inches that come with it that secure the longevity of the sport here. I think being at NBC, I feel very privileged to work for such an amazing company. I get to cover some of the best rugby in the world. We have Premiership Rugby, Champions Cup, Six Nations, the Lions, World Cups, World Cup Sevens, the Seven Series. And I think all of those products give us an opportunity to grow a fan base, to educate a fan base, and to cater to a much starved existing fan base with current rugby content. I think on the ground in America, the rise of MLR, the success of the men's and sevens programs, the increasing the improvement of the American collegiate program and filtering that up. They did their first year this year where they did a draft from the colleges. 24 players get drafted to the MLR. There's new teams coming in, a mix of international players, plus a lot of American players playing in the MLR, getting better coaching, full professional environment. All the foundations and the template is there for this to be successful, but it is no means a short-term endeavor. It's a long-term slog. I think the next goal is to try and find a window in the United States where rugby can universally, even if it's 6-8 weeks, find a slot in the high school season where it can fit in, even with programs where football, basketball, and other things are good, even if it's touch as such, just because the level of crossover athletes that America gets is incredible. And a lot of these guys that are able to do it don't actually find rugby until they're in college or later. But if they were familiar with the rules, had a base understanding, whenever their tier one sport doesn't work out, rugby, it would be a lot easier to transition to rugby. And I think that would be a big step in getting the sport moving forward, especially with the sevens programs, which are probably the biggest driver here because of the Olympics. And you'll hopefully see American rugby athletes wearing Olympic medals, and those will be able to go to high schools, to local clubs, and inspire the next generation. And I do think sevens is a big part of the equation of rugby being successful here.
One last point, Alex. You're 31. I feel like you should be at your peak as a prop now. Maybe other Lions tours or English caps. Does that cross your mind much? Do you ever regret the decision?
Occasionally, but I also know some of the wear and tear that I have on my body. I would never be the same player that stepped on that field in 2013, third test. Like, that incarnation of me was taken from me by certain injuries that were just too much to be able to perform at the same level. So that was always in my mind, that going back there to chase that form yeah, part of me wanted to do it because it's all I was doing and obsessed with. And there's times where I think I probably might have played a little bit more, an extra cap here or there, but I never would have stepped on the field feeling like the best in the world again. I'd always have that sort of pain threshold I had to play through as well. And so, you know, for me, I'm happy that I got to experience what I got to experience. I'm happy that I left, you could say, kind of on my terms. And I'm also extremely happy that I get to be so connected to the sport that I love now and a life after rugby.
Good man. Well, listen, we wish you continued good health for starters. Alex Corbisiero, thanks so much, Alex. Cheers.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.
News Talk already gives you your daily fix of news and entertainment. But wouldn't you